about Perpetua. Since I gotta at some point make a Perpetua versus the Beyonders video, but yeah, let's begin, I guess. First off, her origin story. Perpetua is one of several in a group slash species called the Hands that are sent out by the greater source, or the true source, I guess, of DC that's out beyond all creation, out at the edge of the overvoid, um, to make multiverses. Said source is the presence and also is made of the true presence. Not the one with the bowler cap and stuff, but there is a true presence. Um, and the present stuff I'll explain later, but suffice to say, she comes from the source out in the greater omniverse, and she was sent out to make a multiverse for whatever reason. We don't know how, but she was corrupted at one point to use crisis energies to make her not a dark multiverse, what's the word, to make a crisis energies multiverse. Said crisis energies multiverse was based upon the idea slash concept of doom, and not the concept of hope and justice and whatnot. But suffice to say, she did this so that A, the multiverse would never really grow and evolve, but rather just stagnate, and B, so that the multiverse wouldn't die, and thus she wouldn't need to leave the multiverse, as once the multiverse was made, you go back, or the Hands go back to the source. And eventually those multiverses are judged by the Hands and whatnot. But suffice to say, she didn't do this. Now, she created 3 suns before creating the multiverses, technically. But whilst out in the overvoid, she tore apart pieces of the overvoid, so she does scale to it, in order to make the Monitor, Anti-Monitor, and World Forger. They're, or as they're known, Marnovu, Mobius, and Alpheus, respectively. Once her son, the Monitor, realized that this isn't how the multiverse is supposed to be, Perpetua basically sicked her monsters, apex predators, onto the Monitor. These apex predators were a combination of human and Martian DNA. Anyways, eventually, the Monitor tells his other brothers and convinces them to send a message out to the greater omniverse and get the help of the source or the Hands. The source sends the cosmic raptor, which creates the source wall around the DC multiverse and seals Perpetua within it to prevent her from escaping. However, the 3 realms, so I should go over that. Perpetua made 3 realms, one of matter, the multiverse as we know it, one of antimatter, an antimatter universe which surrounds the multiverse, or formerly surrounded the multiverse, and one of dark matter, which is arguably larger than both of those, but at the very least is large or larger than the regular multiverse, as in the multiverse map that we know. In essence, once the source wall surrounded creation, the Anti-Monitor and his antimatter universe's function, which was to destroy and corrode any matter that tried to escape past the multiverse into the greater omniverse. Once the source wall was created, the function of the antimatter universe was effectively nullified or negated. He swears revenge on his brother, yada yada. Meanwhile, Barbados was a creature made by the World Forger for all the unstable worlds, and Barbados was meant to consume said unstable worlds. However, when he stopped consuming these unstable worlds and started collecting them for the Dark Multiverse, he then gained enough power to kill World Forger. But that's a different story. Suffice to say, I want to make something perfectly clear. After Perpetua got sealed, we never see her at full power again. But suffice to say, she still is stronger than all of these characters despite being weakened and trapped. Now, power-wise, Perpetua should obviously, at her prime, be above almost everyone in the DC multiverse. It is obvious that she is above her three sons, Anti-Monitor, World Forger, and Monitor combined into one form of all their power were still only able to equally fight on par with their weakened mother. Might I add that each of these brothers on their own scales to the entire multiverse. So yeah, clearly levels into outer reversal and high outer reversal. Just the World Forger said that the fifth dimensional imps were, he was sort of manipulating the fifth dimensional imps, and it sort of just implied that anyone from the sixth dimension could passively just neg even the strongest of the fifth dimension, so Mxyzptlk. Mxyzptlk and his kind are able to manipulate Hypertime as if it were fiction to them, or as if it were 2D to them. Something like Hypertime should encompass the entirety of the God Sphere and be of the God Sphere, yeah, and beyond it. But yeah, I guess that's kind of really ridiculous on its own. But additionally, Perpetua scales above Limbo. She scales above Limbo, which is said to be a place where stories do not and cannot exist. This implies to me a transcendence that's greater than just a fictional transcendence, as stories do not and literally cannot exist here. The author or the person writing all the stories is a dead monkey for all the cosmology below. Now, you might be wondering how characters exist here. Well, they're the forgotten comic book characters. Limbo is its sort of own thing, but Limbo should basically it should be above the entirety of the God Sphere and view them as less than fiction. And then the Monitor Sphere views the Limbo as fiction to them. The Monitor Sphere also has higher narratives, and in essence, something like the Monitor Sphere is it's sort of akin to the God Sphere, but for the God's Sphere. That's sort of the best way I can put it. Yeah, Perpetua should scale above. She should scale above Darkseid. Even current Darkseid, I would say she scales above, but at the very least, she scales above like just a base former Darkseid. And he was able to corrupt the source, not the true source, but like the source surrounding the DC multiverse. Suffice to say, Perpetua is ridiculously overpowered. She should be in the top 10 for strongest in DC, she should be top 10 or 20 at least. I do know that there are characters like Michael and Lucifer, and I'm gonna get into that now. So as for characters who could defeat her, based on sheer attack potency or raw power, I'd have to say that the list of beings that could beat her, that are currently alive, is like all 3. maybe like 3 or 4 or 5, but of all the beings who have ever reached a level of power that could possibly defeat her, gets into maybe around 10 or so. First off would be the the presence, like the presence from the the light, as he's called, that's made the overvoid and everything, and is the counter of the great darkness, should scale above her. I'd say that empty hand, arguably, because he shook the hand of the presence or the light, or and he is like an aspect of the great darkness, like a major aspect of it. So I feel like he definitely scales to Perpetua. Um, and then there's also the fact that there is technically there are a bunch of characters who arguably scale, um, like in Vertigo and stuff, but first off, I haven't really read Vertigo in a while, and second off, it's just too controversial and too tiring for me to go over who actually scales above her in there. But suffice to say, she should scale above basically most of DC, I guess. Uh, I don't, I don't really know. She made most of the DC's map. Alright, she made most, if not all of it. And there is a bunch of other stuff with her lore, such as the fact that how is there both a presence but also her? So the thing is, presence made everything on the map after her multiverse. Um, so yeah, and then um, the the Cosmic Raptor destroyed everything she made. The presence, or the one we see in the DC map, is basically is an avatar of like the true presence that was sent to remake this whole DC thing, cosmology. That's how I see it, and he in turn is he made the source and stuff that surrounds the current DC map, but at the same time, there's also an actual presence and an actual greater DC. So the presence we've seen a lot of the times is just the one that was sent to remake this. Still should be strong as or stronger than Perpetua, I'd say, but his scaling's a lot more iffy. And then his sons, basically the ones he sent in after to weave all the creation together. So I'd say that they scale in their bases to a prime Perpetua, or Perpetua at her peak, because they literally made and remade all of DC after she messed it up. Additionally, DC characters with the proper equipment and with the proper preparation have consistently shown the ability to scale to and affect realms that should be significantly superior to them, such as Darkseid, who affected the Source Wall and Source, despite it, well, it should view him as fiction at the very least, due to Limbo, and that should view him even in Limbo as fiction, and then there's the Source Wall, and then the Source. So, like I said, at peak, these characters really, at their peak, just in their bases, they should be strong as or stronger than Perpetua. But if you don't want to say that, and if you want to say that she's above, well, the thing is, with the Sword of Eden, um, Lucifer was shown to be able to cut apart a dark presence. Before you say that was a fake one or a false one or not the actual one, even if you want to say that, Lucifer, by his own admission, says that whatever you are, you may have his power, but you're not him, which implies that, and he's like, you may have stolen his power, but you're not him. It basically implies that even if this isn't the actual presence, which it is, or the presence avatar maybe, um, it still has the full power of the presence, the same presence who remade the DC map. So, nonetheless, he should scale. He also beat two brothers who gained the power of the presence. So there's that, and he's casually flown around in the great darkness. So there's that. A list of who's stronger than Perpetua and who scales to her, in and of itself deserves its own sort of discussion, but suffice to say, the list would be small. But, yeah, with that, I will be ending this.